welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film, explore its themes, the filmmaking, its history, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing teacher in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Roca. I'm a voiceover actor and host and co-host of several shows here in Los Angeles.
And today we've got a film. You know, there's something that I knew was going to happen with the Cine-Files.
Yeah.
And we finally got there. And what that is, you know, for all the movies we've done up to this point have been movies that both John and I loved. We were really ones we had seen over and over again.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark and Superman and Amadeus. And these are films that I knew long before coming to the Cine-Files and had thought about them a great deal.
Right.
And I knew that at some point when we doing this show, we were going to come across a film where I loved and John hadn't seen it very much, or John knew very well and I hadn't seen it very much. And I thought that's going to be really interesting because it won't be two people equally versed in the film. It's going to be a little uneven.
Yeah.
And today we have one that is, this is your movie.
Yeah, I would say so. And I've been known for loving this film for quite some time in the Twitter sphere and in my shows that I host about movies. We're doing 1989's Cinema Paradiso, the Italian import that won the best Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, and a beautiful film which is basically a love letter to the old cinema houses in our childhood for people of a certain age.
Yeah. So normally I ask you how you came to the movie. This time I'm going to tell you first because my story is so much.
How did you come to the movie?
Shorter.
Okay.
Heard it was a great movie.
Yes.
And won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film in 1989. And I rented it on VHS probably in 1990.
Okay.
Thought it was a really good movie.
Yeah.
And the next time I watched it was last week.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had not seen it since I watched it, almost 30 years ago.
How interesting.
That's my whole experience of the movie.
Wow.
I liked it when I was in college.
Yeah.
And I just watched it last week. So tell me, how did you come to this movie?
It's funny. I came to this movie because, like we've spoken about on the show a number of times, it became a cinephile, or what you would call a cinephile, through college, through high school rather. And in my first year or second year of college, my first trip around, I was getting deep into movies, and I was watching movies all over the place. Well, they used to show films at the college, and so that I was at, which I don't want to name, and I went to that went to see a screening of this film because this is what I would do. Like at the time, I was studying international relations, and because I didn't have the strength or the balls to become an actor or study film, which is what I really wanted to do, I was too afraid to do it. And so
it's funny. You know what? I never knew this before, but you and I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I was a theater guy in high school.
Yeah.
And then I went, no, I'm going to be smart.
Yes.
And I went to college and I was a political science major.
Yeah.
And I was going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And then I just kept going back to theater and back to theater and back to theater. And
once it bites you, it's like a disease, man. I wanted to be in the UN. That's what I wanted to be in.
Wow.
Yeah, because
I wanted to be president. Think about that.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
And I went and saw it, and I swear to God, it was a complete what you see with Cupid, right? You see that arrow through the heart. That film was basically an arrow through my heart, and I just fell in love with it from beginning to end because it reflected so much of my childhood growing up. Not that I grew up in a small Italian town, but my parents did, and they told me about their experiences in Bolivia, growing up in Bolivia. My dad was in a very small farm town, and my mom was from the city, La Paz. But I got to hear their experiences of growing up in that kind of environment in the 40s and the 30s, what they experienced. And so to see it on screen at a young age, at 19, 20 years old, I'm still in my formative years, it really moved me. And that kid is me. I was always obsessed with film, and my dad couldn't understand my obsession with it so much, and to see him grow up to become and see now as an older man, I'm still mad in love with films. I co-host podcasts about films. It never leaves me, the love of film, and that's what this movie has always represented to me.
Yeah, this movie, more than any movie I can think of, is a love letter to films as an audience, which is different. There are other films that we could talk about, like 8.5, that are about directors,
sure.
And that the process of filmmaking. There are films about Hollywood.
Right.
There's
The Player, or whatever.
The Player.
Yeah.
There's Bold and the Beautiful. There's all these great films about Hollywood. I even made a film about Hollywood, just The Assistant, still available on iTunes. But this is one of the few movies I can think of that's really about the experience of the audience, the love of watching film in the way that this movie is. And I think This one, you know, sometimes we go into a lot of detail about the story of a film, and sometimes we kind of skip over it.
Yeah.
And this is one where I think we really do need to explain the story because a lot of people probably haven't seen it, and we really think you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, as always, we're going to say, look, this is a spoiler podcast.
Mm-hmm.
There are other podcasts, you know, if it's a movie that came out last week, maybe people say, oh, we're not going to spoil it. Well, this movie's 30 years old. We're going to spoil it. And so the story takes place, as you said, it's in a small town in Italy, in Sicily. And it's actually the director let me get his name.
Giuseppe Tornatore.
Tornatore.
Yes.
And and it's actually his hometown that they filmed in.
Giancarlo is the name in the movie. Yes.
Yeah. And it's in Sicily. It's right after World War II.
Yeah.
And the story is a young boy who is being raised by his mother, and his father has not come back from World War II. We don't yet know if he's survived, but the speculation is he didn't make it.
Yeah.
And he loves movies. Mm-hmm. And there's a small movie theater in the center, in the town square, and the little boy cannot stop himself. He keeps getting into that movie theater.
Yeah, literally the definition of the word precocious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the cutest child actors,
my lord,
of all time.
Right.
And we see his relationship in the film with the movie theater is connected to his relationship to Alfredo, the projectionist. Mm-hmm. And actually, I should say that the movie is bookended with the current day. Man gets a call from his mother to tell him that Alfredo has died. So we know that Alfredo has died in the current day. And we watch this story with this boy and this relationship with this man, Alfredo, as we watch the town and all the people of the town, both in their recovery after World War II and also just the little details of town life. The crazy guy who believes that he owns the town square. Right. The priest who's cutting all the kissing scenes out of all the movies.
It's so great.
All these people, the difference in classes between the people who sit in the balcony and the people who sit below. And we're seeing this in sort of glimpses of daily life as the bond between Alfredo and the little boy. Toto grows. Yeah. And throughout all of this is this love of cinema, of film.
Yeah.
And then should we ruin the whole film?
Well, I mean, we said we're going to spoil it. So as he gets older.
I mean, what I'll say is that I'll avoid spoiling everything, but what I will say is that we see Toto as he grows older, and we see as his relationship with Alfredo changes, and that Toto becomes the projectionist and connected to this place, the Paradiso. That's the name of the cinema. Yeah. And Toto's first love, and then him finally as Alfredo pushes him out of the small town and says, you must go to Rome. You must become what you must become and never look back at this town. Right. Until eventually, at the very end, we see him come back finally after 30 years.
It's a great synopsis. Yeah.
So, and I think his film is very, very unique. And it's both episodic and it lyrical in its approach. In watching the film, what do you think? What is it that hooks you in the most?
I think it's because if you love film the way this kid loves film in the movie, you can't help but be connected to it because I've experienced those same emotions, those same feelings. The fact that he sees the world as a film because he's so influenced by film, even the love story that exists between Toto and Elena later on in the film. When I watched it earlier this morning before we recorded, I went back and I timed the amount of time they actually spend together falling in love. It's literally less than 10 minutes from meeting to falling in love to end. It is 10 minutes of screen time tops. And that's what's fascinating to me because it works for the movie. The movie itself is a movie within a movie within a movie. There's so much going on within it that is evocative of movies itself. And he lives his life as scenes from a movie, as eras in a movie. Like he's in the military, but then he's quickly out of the military, and then he's doing this, and then even the transcendence, even the growing up from a kid to a teenager, which is so fantastically done, with just one wipe of Alfredo's hand across his face, he becomes a teenager, and they cast it so perfectly that you are immediately attracted or connected to the little kid and to the teenage version and to the old version of Toto because they are very much living in their skin at the time, being themselves and exploring the world or having a wonder about the world. Even with older Toto, when he comes back, he is experiencing the town all over again 30 years later. How the changes to all the old people that like the guy who came in and won the lottery and redid the Paradiso, the priest, the two people who met at the theater, fell in love and had kids. Like he sees all of them. You know, the old guy who kept falling asleep, and then even the crazy guy comes running through, and then the guy who was illiterate who helped Alfredo with the theater. You see them all as they age. And so to me, that's what I love about the film, is the connection to a life of a long ago that I heard in stories from my parents, and to see it brought with such life. And the score, you cannot state how much the score by Ennio Morricone just really hooks you into the movie. It's one of the most beautiful scores he's ever done.
Well, and so different, because you think of Morricone and you think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yes, of course.
You think of
the Mission.
Mission's fantastic score.
Right.
And although you can hear some of the instrumentation and some of the orchestration, you can hear this is the same guy, but you don't go Morricone, lyrical and sweet and melancholy. Those are not the terms, and yet this score it's really powerful.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something else that you said, is that you talk about each of the people in the town.
Yeah.
Is that what Toto is an observer. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of fascinating to me, because that's what watching movies is. Yeah. And that's how we feel, that's how I feel a lot of times in life, is sitting back and watching, not being a part of. Right. I think that, what's brought me to be, wanting to be an artist or a writer is not an ability to connect, but sometimes an inability to connect. You know what I mean? Is that feeling as the observer, you get privileged to see stuff that people that are more participatory might be missing out on. Yeah. And this movie is really, you're watching this town and not participating. Toto doesn't do that much. No. And even when you get to, like, as you said, the relationship with Elena, it's very short, and it is beautifully cinematic. It's beautiful, yeah. From the, sneaking into the confessional to take her confession and then whispering to her, to their one of the best first hugs and kisses of any movie I can think of, because there's such a great build to it. I want to go back to something, because I was thinking about it quite a bit in watching the film, is what this shows. Well, let me start this in a different way. Okay. My kid, Jackson, he's growing up in a world where all media is available to him all the time. Mm-hmm. So if he says, I want to hear this song, he has an expectation that he should get to hear that song right then. I want to watch this show. I want to have this right now. And that's the world that he is. It's not the world that you and I grew up in. No. You and I, if we wanted to see something, well, it had to come on. If we wanted to hear a song, well, it had to come on the radio, and it probably wouldn't. Right. And that we still had much more options in terms of entertainment than the people in this film did. Yeah. And that what's interesting to me, because to me it goes back to the church. There's a connection between the church and the cinema, is that prior to 1900, the main source of entertainment for basically everybody was the church. That's where you went. There's a reason why the architecture of the church is the way that it is because that was the entertainment. You came into the church, you're in a small town. The church is the most beautiful building in the town. It has these stained glass windows. That's the storytelling. The stories, that the music that you hear was church music. And so it's interesting that after 1900, suddenly there's the competition from the cinema. And in a lot of ways, the way it's treated, there's a very clear relationship between the church and the cinema in this film. And that the coming together of a communal space to watch this film together is so completely different from what my kid experiences in terms of his relationship to media. Because his relationship is, I want to see that, and it's what he wants, and he gets to have it, and that's it. Right. As opposed to, this is what's playing, and we as a community are all going together to experience this thing as a group. And that's something that I don't know. I mean, I think we still have it to some degree, but not like this.
Well, it depends on the town you're in, right? I mean, like a lot of us here in Los Angeles, and you know this as friends, we've been friends a long time, like we'll go see opening night.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, when we went to see Star Wars The Force Awakens, 53 of us went to see that film. It was a lot of people. You've been part of the larger groups we go when we go see this film. So we do that because of we love of film, because of the desire, and because most of us in our group of friends are young enough to remember when it was an event to go see a movie. So we still hold on to that joy of the event of it. You know, it's so much fun. But I think in other towns, it's not that big of a deal. You know, it's not that there's not that film, that desire to go and see it. It's not as huge, you know. And so it just all depends on what town you're in, I think.
And you don't know everyone in the audience.
Right.
You know, it's like you go to the multiplex and it's like, well, I'm in this movie and, you know, I'm with a bunch of strangers at the Paradiso. They all know each other.
Yeah.
They're all there together. Yeah. And I get the sense from that is that they went there all the time.
Yes.
It's not, you know, maybe not every night, but a lot of nights, and they saw the same movies over and over and over again. And it was this, you know, and they talked during the movie, and they ate during the movie, and they smoked during the movie.
Had sex during the movie. Masturbate during the movie, all kinds of stuff.
And you see this whole realm of life going on in the film. And it's funny, like, there's talk today of, you know, these day and date releases where you release something digitally at the same time you release it in theater. And I totally understand why economically that might make sense.
Sure.
Nothing like seeing a movie in a movie theater.
Well, and this is the thing. And you're absolutely right, Steve. And that's what's so great about this movie, because it really brings back that love of being in the cinema house, what that means, what that signified, but also not just as a progression of a society, but also there was maybe one of the only ways that you could connect with everybody in a common place. You know, a lot of people, I watch interviews with a lot of people. Like I was watching the 50 Years of Star Trek the other day on History Channel, and Walter Koenig said that there's a day that there's hardly a day that doesn't go by where people, and Riker, Jonathan Frakes said the same thing, where people come up to them and don't say like, watching Star Trek was the only time people in my house could get together and not fight. And that's fascinating. And that film is the same way. Watching film was the only time maybe these people from different political leanings, which we saw in the movie, which is so great, could be in one room and enjoy something together, put away their political leanings, and laugh and cry and experience stuff together. It's so a connection of humanity. And that's what I think we've been hitting the death knell on theaters for quite some time now. You know, the more we go digital, the more we do all these kinds of things, the more the movie houses have to step up and become this laser 3D and give more screenings, because they want to attract people back into the theater, because there's nothing like that experience. There really isn't. Seeing a movie at home is not the same thing, and I will never believe it is.
No, I mean, I like controlling my own. I like sitting on my comfy couch, and I've got my nice cocktail that I made myself, and I'm enjoying it's nice. Nothing like going into a movie theater.
No, man.
There's just something about, like, for one of the biggest ones is if you're going to see a comedy and you got to go see it in the theater.
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going to get the experience. And I'm sure you've had this too, where you see a movie in the theater, like, it's so funny, it's so exciting. Then you see it at home a year later and you're like, well, what happened there? And part of it is that you're feeding off of the room.
Right.
There's an experience of being in the room. And it's funny, I'm sure you've had this too, when, I don't know if you had this with your family or not, when you say, okay, I'm going to go into the entertainment industry, I want to be an actor.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are people that demean that stuff and go, oh, it's not important.
Right.
Like, entertainment's not important.
Right.
And you watch the place that cinema has in this town. You go, no, this is important.
Yeah.
Stories are important. The stories that we share together as communities, that's important.
Yeah, and you have the mom symbolizing the one trying to stop him from his love of film, you know, spanking him and telling him it's ridiculous when he almost sets his sister on fire accidentally by leaving the film clips. The back then, the film would catch on fire really easily because of the stock it was made from. It was flammable. So, the mom is telling him it's ridiculous. It's stop. You're crazy about films. You're obsessed about films. There's always someone who's going to tell you not to pursue this. And even Alfredo has it, which is one of my favorite scenes, because I've lived this scene, and anybody who's gone into theater or film, I think for the most part has lived this scene. Alfredo is telling him, because Alfredo becomes his pseudo father, right?
Absolutely.
And he's telling him, don't be a projectionist, don't get into this life. This life is so difficult. You know, you're not going to be happy. You know, go be something else. Go do something. It's what everyone tells you, right? They test you as a way of wanting, if you really want it bad enough in this business, because this business is tough. Not everyone can survive in it. it, and you do what you can to make it if you really believe in yourself. And he's telling him, don't do this at a young age, like at 5 or 6, however old he's, when he's telling him, like, that was terrible. And the kid won't stop. Why? Because it's in his blood. And some people are just born with intrinsic nature of love of film.
Well, and you say that, oh, the mom is trying to tell him it's ridiculous. Right. It is ridiculous.
Right.
You know?
It's make-believe.
And it's also, the people the people that I've known that have been really successful are obsessed to a ridiculous degree.
Yes.
And the people, and we've all known people, whether they're the guy that runs the comic book store or the person who knows every single player on the sports team going back to 1950, whatever, like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yet there's something in some of us that is obsessed.
Yeah.
And that's what we see. And Toto doesn't even know at the beginning what he's obsessed with.
Right.
He just knows that he loves the movies.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, because what's interesting is that we come to learn that he's actually become a film director.
Yes.
And because I agree with Alfredo, actually, don't be a projectionist.
Yeah.
You can do maybe a little bit better.
Right.
That might be true. But there's this moment of like, oh, his history of his education of watching movies over and over and over, and his just expressing this love of movies in the projector booth.
Yeah.
That translates into him becoming a director someday.
Yeah.
That all of the experiences, you get the sense that he pulled in all this experience of the town and all the experience from film, and that he's putting that out into his movies.
Yeah, and he's learning how. And what better teacher than films themselves and classic films themselves? We saw so many classic films that are they have snippets of throughout the film. Stagecoach, the Jean Renoir film, like so many different films are in there, and even the one. And it's such, what's so great is when he's walking after they found out with his mom that his father is officially dead. He is sad. His mom is crying. But what lifts his spirits is seeing this tattered playbill or poster of Gone with the Wind on the wall. It brings it's in this vibrant color because it's a way of reflecting back to him that's where he finds his joy. That's where he finds his happiness.
The antebellum South.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
In movies, of course. So I have a question for you, because you've watched this movie far more than me.
I mean, 1,000,000 times.
Yeah,
it's really in my top 10.
Yeah. So Alfredo is this wise man.
Yeah.
And he drops his wisdom, and we all wish we had this wise man in our life.
Sure.
This kind of a guy.
It's our dad.
Yeah. And so there's a great book on martial arts. This is a digression, but it made me think of it, which is it's called It's a Lot Like Dancing. It's about an Aikido guy.
Okay.
And it's one of those books that has, sometimes a page will be filled and sometimes a page will have a 2-sentence quote, and that's it, and a lot of photographs. And one of the quotes is, you just made me think of it, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something like, you can have a dad and you can have a mentor, but don't expect your dad to be your mentor, and don't expect your mentor to be your dad.
Yeah.
Your dad can love you unconditionally, but might never know you. Right. And the mentor can know you very well, but might not love you unconditionally. Yeah. And I've always struck by that line.
It's fascinating.
Because that's why this is a really good book. The book is called It's a Lot Like Dancing. Okay. It's a really good book, even if you're not into martial arts. But and Alfredo, I think, ends up being both. Yeah. He does love him unconditionally without question. And he does know him in the way that maybe his dad never would have. Yeah. Because his dad doesn't have the love, because they share the same love, which is movies. So anyway, there's a scene where he and Alfredo sit down. Alfredo's an older man, and he tells him a story. Yes. And the story is about, it's sort of a fantasy story of a soldier in love with a princess. And the princess says, if you can stay below my balcony for 100 days and nights, I could be yours. Right. And he stays day after day, tired through the rain, the story goes on. Right. And then on the 99th day, the soldier leaves. Right. And Toto says, because obviously he's saying something, Alfredo's telling him something profound, and it's in the middle of his love with Elena. And Toto says, why? Why did he leave? And Alfredo says, I don't know. Yeah, don't ask me these things. Don't ask me these things. Yeah, if you figure out, tell me. Tell me what this story means, John. I really need to know. I think, to me, it just means that it is about whether you can do it or not. It's not about achieving the goal. It's about the journey. And that's what Alfredo seems to have been telling him through the whole movie, is that it's about enjoying the journey, enjoying the life, enjoying this world, being the best you can be,
pursuing the goals, letting go of the past, and from the beginning with Elena, he tells him this is a doomed relationship. She's a beauty with blue eyes. She's a blonde hair beauty. We cannot get women. We will not attain women like that. And you know why? Because we're destined to be heartbroken dreamers. And this is what
Alfredo's telling him?
That's what he's telling him. We're not going to get those kind of women because those kind of women want a stable, solid guy who does these kinds of things. And he's like, you're not that. And that's what he's trying to tell him, that those beauties are unattainable for people like them who are dreamers in that way. And that's why when he says this thing about the soldier, it relates. And then when you see later Toto, as a teenager, tells Elena, I'm going to sit under your balcony until you open the window. He does, but then even he walks away when he hits his limit because he realizes the fallacy of it all, that it shouldn't be just one man doing everything and then she doesn't come to him. And what you see is when Toto walks away, ironically, she comes to him in the movie house.
Let's say not ironically.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like if a guy who idealizes someone, that's generally not attractive.
Exactly.
People like it when someone walks away.
Sure, yeah.
That's what attracts people.
Yeah.
You're not attracted to something that's right next to you and available. You're attracted to something that moves farther away.
Yeah.
So the moment he goes away, that's the moment she comes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because like there are a lot of strange details in the film.
Yeah.
I want to go to the opening of the film.
Sure.
So we open the film with Mom by the sea, has gotten some information. She says that she's called her son, who obviously they don't see each other very much.
Nope.
The daughter's there. And then we cut to older Toto coming home, and there's a woman in his bed who he kisses and is obviously in love with, and then the woman, obviously has an attraction to.
Yes.
Yeah. That's exactly my point. Thank you for correcting me. She says, your mom called. She thought I was someone else.
Yeah.
I let her just believe it. I played along.
Yeah.
So obviously this has happened before.
Yes. His whole life since he left.
That's what we're led to believe.
Yes, exactly. And his mom says the same thing later on, right? I don't want to cut you off.
No, this is exactly the point.
Yeah.
Is Toto happy?
No.
He's
He's happy pursuing his life, but he's a heartbroken dreamer. That's what he is. That's what he is. And the best directors, and this is what I love about the film, man, because I relate, because that's me. That's what I'm watching in Cinema Paradiso is me, a version of me. I know what that's like to pine for the woman that you cannot have. I've chased the beauty of my life, and I relate to him so well. And these series of girlfriends or women that he sleeps with, he can't find the connection because he's looking for Elena, and he can't have her. Yes, he's looking for that love, that idealized love he had of Elena. And the fact that she disappears with no notice and never sees her again, unless you stupidly watch the director's cut of this film. The 2 hours, 45 minutes director cut, he finds her.
Right.
It's horrible.
Why is it horrible?
It's horrible because he's...
So I'm sorry, let's make this a little clearer.
Yeah.
So there's the true love, Elena, and as you say, she disappears. And then
she does, while he's in the military.
There's several different cuts of this film. There was a slightly longer cut that didn't do very well in Italy.
Yeah.
And they cut it down, maybe cut 15, 20 minutes out of it. And then that's the film that won the Grand Jury Prize at Cannes. That's the film that won Best Picture and then became internationally quite popular, which led to the release of this director's cut that you're describing. And describe what happens in the director's cut.
Well, he finds Elena and she's married, and they have this real sloppy affair, and it just destroys.
They have an affair.
Yeah, they have a moment or something in the car. It just destroys what had been his idealistic view of the love affair, and it makes it so real. It just kills it. Whatever lyrical, beautiful thing it was, it makes it too real, too harsh, too dramatic, and it rips away the love story that you feel about the film and his idealized version of his life. And although that is certainly essential to understanding what the difference is between life and movies, I think we have enough lessons in the movie that we don't need one more that destroys this beautiful relationship.
Well, yeah, and Elena is this magical person that's there and is gone.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want to. I could see why we don't want to go back to her.
I'm telling you, if you watch it, you'll understand. It just stabs it and tears it. It's essentially like what he filmed his first film. It's essentially a culling of the bull or ox,
right.
whatever.
One of his first films is watching the slaughtering of a bull.
Yeah, it's basically what they do to the love story by adding all that time in there. Plus, there's more to the films that he shot back then. So he becomes almost like a stalker. And that's what kills it. He becomes like a stalker. He goes to find her. He like forces himself, and it's just like, oh. And so,
well, with that great sales job, I'm not going to run right out and watch the director's cut.
As complete as if you want to, but it just kind of like Apocalypse Now. When you watch the redo version, I do not like the redo version at all. It just takes away so much of what is the point of the movie. You know?
And it's hard to say because I'd seen the original so many times before watching it that when suddenly Martin Sheen is smiling in a scene, I'm like, what's that about?
Yeah.
And then we go to the, and this points out something. The French plantation. This points out something. One of the myths I want to destroy on the course of this podcast is the myth of the perfect director who has the vision, the pre-created vision in their mind. We say this about Kubrick, it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Hitchcock, it comes up a lot. The idea that they've already imagined the film, and all they have to do is execute it.
Yeah.
Now, those guys are really smart, and maybe that's true of them. But for most mortals, that ain't true. And even great directors, Coppola being a perfect example, we don't know what we're doing. Yeah, it's we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out in the script stage. We're trying to figure it out in the production stage, and we're trying to figure it out in the editing room. And that director's cut is a perfect example.
Yeah.
He thought this is what's going to work, and he was wrong. Unfortunately, in the version and even with the movie that he released first, that wasn't quite it either. It took some time to figure it out. And one of the things you have to have as a director is the strength to say no to yourself, to accept the fact that you made a mistake, to accept the fact that something isn't working the way that you want it to work, because it rarely does, and just let it go.
Well, this, along with your myth, destruction of that myth, I've been really recently just pushing the idea of how much people need to revere editors in film, because they are the most, to me, in my belief, and maybe directors get angry at this or actors get angry at this, to me they are the most essential part of any movie, the creation of any movie, because that is what your movie is. The editor creates your movie with you, and it's the editor who he or she finds the right stuff, combines the right stuff, finds the right takes, puts them together, and creates your movie with you, with your vision. And I think you cannot overstate how important a good editor is.
I'm always hesitant to say anything is the most essential.
Fair. Okay.
Because if you don't have actors, there's nobody on screen.
Right.
If you don't have a DP, then you can't shoot. If you don't have a script, every single cog in that machine of making a film is essential.
Yeah.
But the editor's job is unique in the sense that the editor is the one who actually puts it together.
Yeah.
Who makes it work. And if you've been in the editing room, and anyone who's interested in film, particularly actors, I always recommend that actors spend some time in the editing room, because although it's very painful for actors, is that you'll see when magic works. Put two shots together, nothing. Yeah. Put two shots together, nothing. Try them this way, nothing. Put them here together, ooh, something happened.
Exactly.
And that's what you're trying to do, is to create magic. It happens within the juxtaposition of images, and suddenly you're feeling something that you didn't feel before. And Cinema Paradiso is a perfect example of it, because their long sequences, it's not a driving story.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No.
There's not like a narrative engine that's pushing you along. What will have? There's a murderer in town. We must escape them. It's lyrical. It's paced slowly. It's observational, and yet it builds to tremendous emotion. One of the remarkable things is you spend so much time in this theater, and the theater burns down in the middle of the film, which is really upsetting.
It's very upsetting.
And then the theater is rebuilt in this magical way and becomes this very magical place. And then at the end of the film, when Toto returns to the city, you see the theater, and it's been abandoned.
Yeah.
And I was more moved by the destruction of the theater, of a building, than by almost anything else in the film. Because you spent so much time there, and you have the filmmaker has such love of that movie theater, and love of that movie theater as it represents community, as it represents film, as it represents the dreams of your main character, and the main characters have such love of that place, and the town has so much love of that place. When I see that place falling apart, it hurts
Yeah.
because you realize that something is over.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that Alfredo says. He says you can leave town, and if you come back, you think you can pick up that thread where you started, but you can't.
Right. It's one of the most powerful things when he convinces him to leave and then to stay gone, which we find out that he has for 30 years. And I love this throwaway line that the mom has with him when he's finally come back and he's walking through the house or the apartment, wherever his mom is living. And she says, why don't you rest? I'll get you some. He's like, no, Mom, it's only an hour away by plane. And she goes, after all this time, you shouldn't have told me that.
Yeah.
That you could have come back at any point because it's only an hour away by plane. And it's just, that's so powerful. But then at the end, she also absolves him because she says, you did the right thing. When she catches him, which is so perfect when she catches him as the older Toto watching the film of Elena. 30 years he's looked for Elena. That's what he's done. The films have replaced Elena. That's his true love is the film. But I mean, that's what he loves is film, but his true love is Elena. And that he cannot find her anymore. And so he's still caught up in that. And so later when she asks him when they're by the thing and he's smoking, she says, what's on your mind? And he's saying, well, I haven't talked to you. I hardly know my sister and blah, blah, blah. She says, you did the right thing. You did the right thing by leaving, you know. And my mom has had that conversation with me a couple of times.
Yeah, but you've come home to visit her.
I have, but only once a year. Some people go home, like Sarah, our friend Sarah goes home 4 or 5 times to see her mom. I'm good seeing my family once a year for Christmas. Because my life is here. My friends are here. My second family is here, you know.
Yeah, so in your mind,
yeah,
Alfredo's advice was right.
Yes. Because he would have never been this successful film director if he had stayed in the town. He'd have accepted being just a cog in the town.
It's not the stay in the town. Absolutely, Toto's got to get out of town.
Yes.
No question. He's got to go to Rome. It's go out of town and never, ever come back. I will never speak to you again. Never come back to see your family, to visit your mom. Never come back here at all.
Yeah.
It's that piece of advice that I go, was that good advice?
Yes, again, because Toto is a dreamer and he needs his heart to be hardened to survive. And I think that's what he's been trying to teach him from the beginning. And that's what, even when he was a child, he's been trying to teach him that the world is tough. This is not an easy place. And this is what, you know, and once again, this is why I relate. My dad told me this all the time. And so.
What did your dad tell you?
Oh, he would just tell me all the time, you got to be tougher than everybody else. You got to be stronger. You can't cry. You can't let them see you fall apart. You can't let all this kind of jazz. It was all this stuff because he knew I was a sensitive kid. From the beginning of birth, I was a sensitive child about a lot of things. And so my dad was always afraid that I was going to suffer in this world because he had suffered in this world because he was kind of semi-sensitive himself. He had suffered in this world and been betrayed and been hurt and been lied to and had people like stab him in the back. And so he didn't want that for me. So in his mind, he thought by telling me all his experiences and by telling me to not trust a lot of people, to stay strong, to stay divided, to stay separated from people, always be aware of what can happen to you, that he was helping me. But in the long run, that isn't what was effective for me. It works out in the film to a degree for Toto because he does become successful, but there's so much heartbreak within him, and you can see it in his face. That's
where I kind of go, and this is not a criticism of the film.
No.
So much as it's I don't know how to feel at the ending, because Toto is who he is throughout, which is this observer. Yeah. And he's this person, he's not going to have love. And the end, which will spoil anyway, is that so in the very beginning of the film, we meet young Toto as an altar boy in the church, and he goes with the priest to the theater where the priest gets to preview every film, and then he bring a bell?
Yes, he rings a bell every time he has a cut.
Anytime there's anything remotely sexual, a kiss or a look or anything like that,
an over-aggressive hug.
He rings a bell, and Alfredo will cut that scene out of the movie. So this town in Sicily has never seen people kiss on screen in 30, 40 years of movies, until we get to what seems like the early 60s. And then suddenly the kissing starts to happen. And so Alfredo has been cutting these scenes out. And Toto says, what happened? This is little boy Toto says, what happens to the kissing scenes? And he says, I try to find the place but to put him back in, but sometimes I can't find the place.
Right.
Oh, well, what happens to them? And I don't remember what he says now.
Oh, well, there's a stack of them in a bin on the other side of the projection.
That's right.
A projection, what is it? The film projector, there's a stack of strings of them.
Right.
And Toto finds them.
Of the clips. And then time goes by, and we don't really think about it much at all. And then adult Toto comes back to town for Alfredo's funeral, and he's seen all the people that he knew and all the life that he knew. And then he gets Alfredo, we find out, has given him a reel of film, 35 millimeter film.
Right.
And he goes back to Rome, and he's in his projection booth, and he puts that 35 millimeter film on, which I really hope that projectionist was really careful, because that stuff would burst into flames. And what is it?
That's a good point.
It's the sequence of all the kissing.
Yeah.
It's all the outtakes, all those cut moments of kissing.
Right.
And it's so lovely, and it's so romantic, and it's so lush, and it's such a beautiful, loving gift from his mentor he hasn't seen in 30 years. And at the same time, there's part of me that's going, this is his only kissing. He doesn't, yes, he has women, but he has no love. That his only existence of romantic love is from the outside observing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a very bittersweet ending to me.
Absolutely. Very bittersweet. Yes.
Yeah. And that's why I keep going back to Alfredo's advice. And was this what? Because we don't know who Toto could have been.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, he is who he is.
Yeah.
And we don't know, because it is interesting. This is the director's second film, shot in his hometown.
Yeah.
We don't know I don't know anything about the guy.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, because this film much better than me. So I don't know if he's a happy guy or an unhappy guy, and it's funny. Maybe this is me as a guy in my late 40s, where me as a guy, probably when I saw it the first time, I was like, yes. Choose the life of art over everything else. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
And now as a guy in my late 40s, I'm like, maybe don't do that. Maybe that's not such a good idea.
But then you've become Alfredo.
No, because I would never tell my kid.
You just said it's not such a good idea.
It's not such a good idea to choose the life of art over love and everything else.
Oh.
I'm saying that maybe don't choose the life of art.
Okay.
I'm saying if my kid came to me and wanted advice.
But what's the difference?
What do you mean?
If you love film as much as you can love a woman, being denied the love of film is no different than being denied the love of a woman. That's what I'm saying. Alfredo saw that Toto's real love was film, was the thing he loved the most was film. So Alfredo said to Toto, go get out of here, go pursue your dream, go be a success, go be this.
But he also saw that he loved Elena.
He did, but he always knew that it was destined to fail.
Why?
He said that from the beginning.
How does he know that?
Well, some things you know as a man as you're older. And also, and you can make a point, and this goes to your point, Steve, and this may support your argument. Toto is a flawed mentor because also he's just a projectionist in town, an illiterate projectionist in town. His points of views are sweet and they're poignant at times. But again, he's limited intelligence, limited.
Well, I don't know. He's limited intelligence.
offer.
He's obviously very intelligent. He's not very learned, except in.
I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah,
he's limited
very
learned.
intelligent.
Yeah. He's learned.
Yeah,
it's
it's
not as learned.
funny. It's like if this is a movie that's a fairy tale, which in a lot of ways it is.
It is.
Then the mentor is giving you the good advice because he's Merlin.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's the wise old man, and it's a movie is very lyrical and fairy tale-ish in the way that it's presented. And in that sense, yes, Toto had a destiny.
Yeah.
And to achieve that heroic stature as director required sacrifice of love and life. And in a fairy tale, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If this is a real story about real life, then that's where, as far as it's not that it falls apart as a film.
Right.
That's where I start to go, I don't know how I feel about this, because there is nothing that says you can't have art and have love.
No, of course not.
You know, there's nothing that says that you can't have art and still love your mom.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and yet
He does love his mom.
He didn't come home for 30 years.
No.
That's kind of a dick move.
Well, I don't agree with you.
When you start
Because we have a common friend who does not go home to see his mom for Christmas a lot.
Well, I actually...
And he loves his mom dearly.
Yeah, I think once you have some money, which he clearly did.
He does.
And has had some money, at least let's say for 15 years.
Sure.
Probably. And it's an hour away by plane, you should go visit your mom.
Well, maybe he's not ready to confront those feelings of that town.
Because Alfredo told him that.
Right, but also because Elena is attached to the town.
It's funny, you put Elena, it's not that, you know this movie way better than me.
Well.
You're the PhD in this movie.
I've also put meaning on it, so you know.
Well, that's what's interesting, and this is it's funny. You know what's interesting, which I'm happy about, and I was hoping that this would happen.
Yeah.
Almost everything we've watched up to this point and talked about, we've agreed. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And in this film, there's so much level for us to go like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
You know, because you can put your own meaning onto it. You know, like I put I loved movies, and watching that kid watch movies, that's how I felt too.
Right.
So I put that on. But then I also put on I have a family and I have a wife and I have a child and I have all these things. And I'm at the point now where I'm sort of not as driven as an artist, as I was when I was 25.
Right.
When I was 25, that was everything.
So that's my question to you. Do you remember having this issue with the film when you saw it the first time?
No, I can't. I mean, I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm not, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I have no idea.
But 25-year-old, you're saying as 25-year-old, and that's the time we find Toto going off from he's in his
just finished the army.
Yeah, he's in his early 20s.
Yeah.
He's going off. So the drive, the ambition, the career, he goes because that's what's important to him at that time is establishing himself, becoming successful, whatever, it is that. If love happens. His great love was Elena, and his great love left him.
His great first love.
Sure.
Well, in the context of the film, you're totally right.
She was his only love. You see no other love. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And this is, this points out that it's really.
Because you're seeing it now as a 40-year-old with a wife. It's a whole different perspective.
Whole different thing.
But if you're a 20-year-old watching this, you're like, yeah, Toto gave him the right advice. Fuck yeah, go.
Well, because when you're 20, you go, well, that's it. I had love. I will never have that again.
I'm sure I'll find it. But I'm going to go pursue my career.
You believe in these things in your early 20s, like true love.
Yes.
I don't believe in true love.
Right.
No.
I did once, yeah.
Yeah, because now I've been married for 19 years. Love is complicated.
Love is work.
It's work and people are and this actually is a really good point about this film is that movies want to present things in a simple way.
Yeah.
Because they're movies. You got a couple hours. And so they're good guys and bad guys. And things are romantic and things have to make sense.
Yeah.
The real world doesn't make sense in that way. Things are confusing and people don't have, like in a movie, I have a super objective.
Yeah.
I want to be a director. In life, it's like, well, I want that, but I also want, to get home and take a nap. Our motivations are often complicated and difficult and people don't particularly make sense.
Yeah.
And so this movie is sort of a lyrical movie thing about this person's life. If we take everything at face value, it's exactly as you say. He had his true love. Mm-hmm. He had to choose between true love and his real true love, which is film. Yeah. And he made that choice. Alfredo is the wise man who does even, he's the blind man that sees into your soul. Yep. And he is all those things. And then, and that's all correct. Mm-hmm. But then if you go like, well, wait, is this real life? Well, then I think about his mom on the island for 30 years going, where's my fucking son?
Right.
I think about the idea of don't ever come home is so harsh and that life is not usually black and white decisions.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
But she sits there on the train, puts him on the train with her. She understands what she's doing in that moment.
But she didn't know. She didn't know that Alfredo was going to lay that heavy shit on him when he was leaving.
Don't come back.
Your mom goes, wait, what?
I won't open.
What do you mean don't come back?
I won't open the door to you if you ever come back. But I think that happens for a lot of people as they leave a situation. And there was nothing to indicate that his mom didn't love him. His mom loved him. The movie goes out. A good movie kind of highlights these difficult times in their relationship, but as he becomes a teenager, there's not a lot of the mom interaction that we see when he was a kid.
No, and part of it
purposefully
is,
so.
I mean, this is post World War II Italy. So in 1946 or 47, when the movie starts, these people are living on at starvation levels. And when you're living at starvation levels, to have a kid who keeps sneaking off to the movies, that's a real problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this isn't like in particularly the 50 lira scene.
Yeah, so beautiful.
It's a beautifully done scene where he was supposed to go buy the milk.
Uh-huh.
And
for the family.
And this is like life or death stuff.
Yeah.
And rather than do that, he paid to go to the movie theater, spent all day in the movie theater. Yeah. And then comes out, mom finds him and she's slapping him and that she waited all day and that he lost the money. And of course, Alfredo sees this. Yeah. And he's with the usher, the guy who runs the theater. Yeah. And says, oh yeah, why are you lying to your mother? Mm-hmm. You know that you got in free to the movie theater, and Toto gives that sort of, well, what? and then Alfredo turns to the usher and says, "What is it? What did you find in the seats today?" Yeah, and the usher very slow
as hell,
slow in the uptake goes, "I found a comb and this piece of paper, and I found this." And Alfredo does this beautiful sleight of hand. He's like, "Oh, I see you found this 50 lira note too," and hands it to mom. And does mom know?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
The look on her face.
Mom knows that's coming from Alfredo.
She knows she can't be proud to not accept it either. Yeah.
And that's some beautiful, beautiful storytelling right there.
Well, that's what is so beautiful about the movie, man. Even with the lyrical nature of it all, it still is realistic in its portrayal of those times.
Yeah.
It's a window into a time that a lot of us will never experience again, or will never experience. Period. But I don't know how many small towns there are that are still like this all over the country. I mean, all over the world. And you see, especially in the sequence when they do of the biking back and forth between the towns, you see how more dilapidated the other theater is in that town because the person who built it didn't win the lottery like the guy who wins the lottery in the other town in
So to explain this sequence for those of you who haven't seen it, what you should know is that films are divided into reels.
Yeah.
So when you go to see a movie in a movie theater, you think it's just one continuous thing, but in fact, there's 7 or 8 reels of film that have to be loaded in and played continuously. Now, today they have great ways of doing this that aren't a problem, but back in the time, you had to manually switch over the reels.
Yeah.
And so rather than having 2 different prints of a film for these 2 small towns that are next door, they're having a guy on a bicycle ride each reel back and forth just in time for it to be ready. And of course, he's not making it in
multiple
time.
screenings,
riding up and down this hill on the Sicilian coast, and of course, he's not making it in time. So you got people in the audience going, "Start the movie." It's hilarious.
Yeah, and but the movie itself is a great progression through time, through decades, through political leanings, through changes in the culture, changes in Italy, all the stuff that's happening. You see it in the movie, and that's what's so fantastic. And how do you see it? You see it through film. Yep. You see it through the films that are being shown. You see it from these occasional banter between the townsfolks, especially the guy who leaves to go to Germany. You see the guy, go over, let Stalin give you a job. I mean, like, what does that mean? He's going to Germany. How's Stalin, a Russian figure, factor in? Oh, it's because he's a communist. Oh, okay. But you have all that. There is this thing, and you see the progression, like you were mentioning earlier. We start to see nudity in the movie theater, like all that, because that's the society progress. And that's what's so great about the movie. I think it reflects a time in another country that we went through as America as well. You know, I'm sure there were many priests that would go to even nowadays. There's a website you can go where you can order a movie that has cut out all the sex scenes or kissing scenes. Yes, I think it's a Catholic website or a Christian website. You can go and order films, and they have personally cut out the questionable stuff in movies. So it still happens.
Good
the influence of religion.
Maybe we can have them sponsor the Cine-Files.
No, we don't. No, I don't want them to sponsor the Cine-Files.
It's funny. You make such a good point, and I think one of the things that's so noticeable to me, that's so lovely about this film, is that movies tend to focus on heroic deeds, particularly today. So you're watching Captain America, or you're watching, John McClane. Yeah. You're watching these heroic figures, and particularly big movies, and we don't focus on the normal guy. Mm-hmm. And this movie, over literally 40 years, is focusing on just ordinary people. Yeah. And you get to watch little snippets of them over time, over a long period of time. And there's something really moving seeing who they become. Yeah. Because we're not very good at remembering stuff. Like, I know that I actually knew my mom when she was 32. Right. But I can only picture my mom as she is 75 today. Yeah. It's hard to picture her then. And I remember I had an experience, which I don't know if this is just reminding me of it. We were at my uncle's house, and my uncle had found a bunch of 16 millimeter film. Oh, wow. From when they were kids. Oh, man. And so he's showing this film, and it's my dad and my uncle when my dad's 11 and my uncle was 6 and all of the cousins. And the thing that I realized in watching it was they kept shooting the kids. Yeah. And the thing, too, about this era is that film was precious. Yeah. Everyone has their iPhones and whatever. You can film all you want. You can film that, and we all do. And I think there's something sad about that, because there's something about no, this is all there is. Mm-hmm. We only have these 3 minutes. And they kept filming the kids. And then the camera would pan by, and I would see my grandmother at 30-something years old. Or 28 years old. Yeah. Or I would see the house that they lived in, or their car, or their clothes my grandfather was wearing. And I wanted to yell at the person running the camera, stop! Show me that. Stop showing those kids. I like the kids. But show us the world that we lived in. Yeah. Because I don't get to see my when I met my grandfather, in my memory, he was 65, 70 years old. Yep. And seeing him as a young man, in a 3-piece suit, going off to work or something. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And this is something that's in this movie throughout, is you get to see just these ordinary people and how they sit in the movie theater and how they smoke their cigarette and what they like over a long period of time as they grow older.
Right. Well, it's funny to me because for me, what I found watching it again now, because I hadn't seen it in maybe a year or two, but I remember
30 years.
It's been 30 years. Right. I didn't want to go back to it. No, I remember when I watched it younger, I was obsessed with the love affair between him and Elena. Just obsessed with the
romantic love
right,
affair.
Romantic. It's very romantic, right? All the scenes are romantic. How they fall, the montage of them falling in love is romantic. Her coming to see him in the rain after the summer's ended, very romantic. Her coming to see him in the movie theater, very romantic. All their interactions are very. Even the first time he sees her is romantic. Picking up her sandwich, beating up the guy so he can be the one that picks it up. Like all of that, sneaking into the confessional. It's very romantic. Those are things of young love, and so I always loved that. Was very moved by that. Was very heartbroken by it through the movie. This time around, I cried in a different place because I'm older. I used to cry at the end of the Elena situation. I used to cry when he goes off and leaves his mom. I used to cry at that. Now I cried when he came back because he saw how old everybody was. And that's how I feel now, having lost my dad, seeing him get older and pass away, seeing other uncles, other friends getting older, getting grayer, that kind of jazz. You're just like, and myself, to a degree, I'm seeing that in myself in moments. And so it's like, this is, so I got really sad because I'm turning that corner in my life where I'm going to start losing people at a more frequent pace, and it's like that's just truth. And so when I was seeing that, it got me emotional this morning thinking about seeing the old illiterate guy who was the usher at the movie theater, seeing the old guy who used to own when he has that moment where he's like Mr. DeViti, and he's like, and Toto's like, what's this Mr. DeViti stuff? You used to order me around all the time. Right. And he says, well, you're a big deal now. And there's that kind of thing of like the progression of life. And once again, although we don't see those 30 years, we see those 30 years Absolutely. In that progression, in that funeral procession,
Yeah, I had this exact same experience. Yeah. Seeing those faces in that group. And it's interesting, too, that they are not only transformed by age, but they are transformed in their perception of him.
Yes.
Because their way, just as you say, their way of relating to young Toto is completely different from the great director coming back.
Right.
And in a way, what Alfredo says is certainly true. Those threads are cut.
Yeah.
He can't relate to them the way he related to them before. And it's funny. I don't know if did you go to high school reunions?
Yeah, I went to my 20-year.
Yeah, I went to mine too. And I think there's always something about you can reinvent history when you go to it on some level.
Sure.
And you can't.
No.
It'll be different.
You fall into the same patterns at times.
Yeah, 20 years later.
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing is that what you want on some level is to bring all the wisdom and the changes and the growth and the hardship and everything you've gained back and redress the issues of the past and still have the same relationships. And you can't. You can't do all these things. They're not going to understand all the changes you've been through because they didn't see them.
Right.
And they're not going to let you turn it into something that it's not. And so it's just this sort of weird, Thomas Wolfe, you can't go home again.
Well, I think that has changed now with the advent of Facebook. I think Facebook changes things. I became friends with so many high school friends that I had no contact with after I went to my 20-year high school reunion, because we all became Facebook friends, and they all got caught up on my life, and now they're like the biggest supporters and champions of the stuff that I do. And it's still tough for me to go home because I don't feel like that's my home anymore. My home is here in LA, but the connections I still have with them, I'm looking forward to my 30-year high school reunion, and it's always nice to see the changes of who is like really picked themselves up and survived, who hasn't, who was supposed to and didn't. And that's what's so great about the movie too. It evokes that as well. Going back, you see what has happened to all those people and how and that's why I thought it was a bit of a cop-out that they changed actresses for his mom. I thought that was a bit of a cop-out.
I thought so too.
Right? Because
they didn't change everyone else.
They didn't change anyone else but his mom. And I thought that was a mistake because she is way too short, the one they chose, and also way too old for him coming back only 30 years after he left. He left when he was...
She seemed like little old Italian lady.
Right.
Yeah.
She was in her 20s when he was 4 years old, so she'll be in her 50s, late 50s, early 60s. She would not look like that. That woman looked like she was in her 70s. So it just in my mind.
He left at 20 and she was therefore probably 40,
Sure.
She'd be in her 70s.
Oh, I guess you're right. No, well, maybe. I think she was in her 35. I think she was 35 when he left.
So she had
38?
She had him at 15?
Maybe she had him at 18. You know, they had him young back
Okay,
then.
38. 30 years later, that's 68.
So, all right, fine.
But
Still a cop-out.
She didn't look right. That's the big thing to me.
Because Alfredo's wife should have been way older than she was, you know?
Sure.
And
Okay, let's not end on that note because that's like a minor note. I'm going to give you my final thoughts.
Sure, please.
I'll let you finish it up.
Yeah.
It's funny. This is our first foreign film.
yes.
And what really is exciting to me and why I'm really curious to hear what other people think is this, more than anything we've done before, is a movie about film and the love of film and the love of being a film watcher. And that is what our podcast is.
Yeah.
You know, and there's almost part of me, I recognized, I don't know, 10 or 15 movies that get played. And there are a whole bunch where I kind of like, I think that's Italian neorealism. Maybe it's Rome Open City. I don't know. But there's such a deep love of the idea of being an audience. And that's really what we're doing on this podcast is that the idea that we can actually spend some serious time thinking about being an audience of these films.
Right.
And that was what was really exciting to me, in addition to just the beautiful music, the beautiful cinematography, the wonderful performances, and this wonderful lyrical quality about this small town. So what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts is, if you haven't seen it and you've gotten all the way through this podcast, please go find it and see it. I think it's on Netflix now. And
it's on Netflix.
Yeah, it is. Okay, good. Yeah. And you can stream it in a number of places. And it's not that expensive a Blu-ray. It's like $8 Blu-ray. I would say go see the 2 hour and watch the 2 hour and 5 minute version. If you want to take a chance and watch the unedited version, knock yourself out, go ahead. But this film is, if you're a lover of film, this film is your language. There's so many people over the last 6 to 8 months that I've turned on to this film who've tweeted at me how much they loved experiencing this film because they love film. And that's what this film is all about. If you're a lover of film, if you're a heartbroken dreamer, this film is your jam and you will enjoy it to pieces. If you have foreign parents, even more so, because it really evokes that time. So yeah, I definitely recommend the film to anybody who wants to watch it. And tweet us your thoughts.
And we definitely want to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on Facebook at the Cine-Files. That's Cine-Files with an F. Yeah. And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter. John, where can they reach you?
They can always reach me at The Rocha Says, TheRochaSays. You see all the shows I'm hosting, co-hosting, and the Top 10 show, Collider Network on YouTube at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays.
It's a fantastic show. You should definitely check it out. And please review us on iTunes. And that's it for this week. We'll see you next time on the Cine-Files.